Hi everyone, Comic Reviewer here, this time reviewing on issue 4 of Harley Quinn, the Eat, Bang, Kill Tour. Now, as you know, Harley Quinn, the Eat, Bang, Kill Tour takes place after the Season 2 final, where Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy go on an all-out road trip, and the cover mainly has Vixen and Ivy duking it out. And let's get on the story. It starts off with Ivy and Harley about to get romantic again, until they get news reports of a new eco-villain terrorizing Detroit. And one of the news reporters points out about a new kind of blob villain showing up and wreaking havoc, with Cyborg and Satana and Vixen trying to deal with it. And we see the creature's name is Methanic, saying, "The name's Methanic, the best poisonous villain out there, unlike a certain plant that gives you an annoying rash." And of course, mainly uses its substance to try and take control of Cyborg and Vixen, and with Vixen saying, "Cyborg, snap out of it!" And of course, does some checking, and mainly leaves. And of course, we see how 20 kind of tells people to stay safe and that from this new villain. And of course, we see how Ivy knows that this villain is too dangerous and they need to stop it. And of course, we see how Ivy and Harley decide to go to Detroit to help deal with it. And we see how Vixen is at a sort of fashion show and gets word from Batman that Poison Ivy and Harley are at the area and might be working with Methanic. And we see how Vixen takes one of her friends off into the taxi to do some private stuff. And we see how later on Harley and Poison Ivy end up at Nightfall's house, and turns out Ivy can stay here due to her being a close friend to Nightfall. And after getting some breakfast, we see how Wire shows up saying, "Harley, what the hell are you doing at my girlfriend's?" And we see how she tries to take on Harley Quinn, but turns out Livewire is a close friend of Poison Ivy's. And turns out that Nightfall and her are actually girlfriends. And if you don't know, from the picture, Nightfall was in a sort of villain league back in the 80s comics with Fastball, Black Mass, and Crowbar. But it turns out they had a falling out back in before Ivy's wedding, and her and Nightfall broke up, and tells them to get their stuff and don't come back. And we see how Harley tries to talk with Poison Ivy, but of course Ivy just wants to tune things out and keep on driving. And we see how, despite Harley's best intentions, Ivy doesn't want anything to do with Harley until then. But after getting some ideas, we see how Harley explains the situation to Livewire, and turns out that there's some CEOs that Poison Ivy hates for destroying the environment, and they're going to work things out. So of course, after taking out the two staff members, they pose as them and serve their food. And we see how each one by one, the CEOs end up getting killed. And we see Ivy saying, "Is there anything we can get you? A glass of contaminated water, perhaps? Please don't!" And we see how they make a quick break for it. And just as they're about to get romantic, Vixen shows up saying, "Damn, Cyborg was right about where you two would round up." And of course, we see how Vixen's not dumb and knows that it's just a wig Harley's using. And we see how she uses her animal totem to use the animal's abilities. And we see how Ivy tries to use her pheromones, and we see Vixen saying, "Well, that was rude. Did you brush today, Ivy? No freaking way! It doesn't work! Wait, Ivy's breath doesn't stink. Damn!" And of course, we see her using the abilities of a snake, a frog, and we see that something's trembling the earth, which is a whole load of animals: rabbits, bears, giraffes, and lions. Turns out the pheromones worked, but it worked because since she was connected to the animal totem, it only worked on the other animals. And we see how Ivy and Harley make a break for it when Vixen used her totem to use the stunk. And we see how Gordon now gets word of where Ivy and Harley Quinn are, setting his next plan in motion. And this is the story. I think issue 4 is sort of okay. I think the issue is more like trying to throw in Cyborg, Vixen to show where they are, and keep in mind, since they were presumably in Detroit, this kind of implies that a version of Justice League Detroit does exist in the Harley Quinn animated series, which either implies that there's more Justice Leagues around other areas than just one. So I think it still deserves a thumbs up. Still good, and still alright. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing out.